And so let's talk about that article, because analysts do predict 180K to 250K price top in 2025. I'm hard pressed to agree with this, but let's see what they have to say. So analysts from VanEck, Fundstrat, and Standard Chartered forecast a 2025 Bitcoin top between 180,000 and 250,000, citing institutional adoption and historical market cycles. Rising global liquidity and record spot Bitcoin ETF inflows have reinforced Bitcoin analysts' most bullish price projections. As Bitcoin continues its bull run and sets new highs, one of the most pressing questions among investors is how high can it really go? Timing a market top is a notoriously tricky task. Mastering the art of buying low and selling high demands both conviction and precision, especially when expectations for a new all-time high are mounting. In this phase of the cycle, old and new forecasts offer value. The former help contextualize the big picture, while the latter reflects today's evolving macro and market demands. And timing matters. If Bitcoin tops in 2025, should investors cash out entirely in fear of another brutal crypto winter, or will this time be different? This is one of those things where, like, Bitcoin hasn't really been different since its inception, right? On a timeline, from a timeline perspective, it's like every halving, then you have a little bit of a run, then it comes back down, then you have another, then you have the bear market, then you have the halving, then it goes up, and you have your run, and then it comes back down. And so if I'm looking at a timing perspective, well, technically, if we're looking specifically at the halving cycle, we're running out of gas from the halving cycle. And so if we're running out of gas from the halving cycle, and I say Bitcoin has never been different since its inception from the halving cycle, I'd have to say we're running out. Like, it looks like we're running to the end, right? Like, we're about to go off the cliff. That's what it looks like to me. That being said, there's always chance for things to be different. And we could also see it not collapse as hard this cycle, just due to the fact that, macroeconomic factors may change that, right? Especially like with inflation and no tax on tips, maybe with this big, beautiful bill. We'll talk about that more later, but there are, maybe it's not as bad this time, I guess is what I would say. The first round of price targets emerged in late 2024 and early 2025 when Bitcoin broke above 90,000. Analysts from VanEck, Galaxy Digital, and Fundstrat began sharing forecasts in the $180,000 to $250,000 range, mainly citing historical price cycles, institutional adoption, and regulatory tailwinds as the primary catalysts. A fresh surge in spot Bitcoin ETF inflows and the growing realization that global liquidity is expanding are new reasons backing Bitcoin price estimates. As BitMEX co-founder Arthur Hayes noted, Bitcoin trades solely based on the market expectation for the future supply of fiat. And those expectations are soaring, but they're also the actual numbers are changing, and that's because over 94% of Bitcoin's been mined now. So the impact of miners on the price of Bitcoin and that supply coming in goes away, and so it really comes down to what the investors perceive the value is, right? So we have some forecasters. Tom Lee says 250,000 by end of 25. And this was in November of 24. I'd be the latest one. Let's see, April of 25. So we have Arthur Hayes, co-founder of BitMEX, says 250,000. Robert Kiyosaki, the author of the Rich Dad Poor Dad, says 180,000 to 200,000. And so we have these two, that are the latest predictors as of April 2025. Interestingly, many of the predictions made at the end of 2024 remain unchanged in May of 2025. That's because the core assumptions, rising institutional demand, and pro-crypto regulatory signals have largely played out as expected. Newer macro developments have only reinforced the case. Liquidity has become the buzzword among analysts as it becomes increasingly clear that treasury yields remain stubbornly high and debt crisis is approaching. As the Bitcoin layer author Nick Bhatia noted, Bitcoin rose with yields in 2021 on growth, stimulus, and inflation. It's rising yields again in 2025, but this time the context is different. It's not optimism driving this move, it's a search for neutrality. Most analysts agree that Bitcoin is firmly in a bull market. On-chain analyst Willy Woo recently pointed, that's a funny name, to the risk signal trending downward, suggesting buy-side liquidity continues to dominate the broader environment. The last time this occurred, between 2023 and 2024, Bitcoin gained over 200%. We're setting up for another solid run for the long time frame, Wu wrote. However, many Bitcoin market cycle based models anticipate a sharp correction in 2026, like February 2026, right? So on a timeline perspective, based on the halving, sell window is October of 25 to February 2026. And whatever hardware you don't sell at that time, because obviously I'm a miner, I care about selling hardware, not Bitcoin. Any hardware that you don't sell between that time, you're going to be stuck with until the next cycle, until the next halving, right? Just based off of the halving cycle and what happens, any hardware you don't sell between October 2025 and February 2026, you will be stuck with until 2028 at the least. Probably 2029, somewhere around there, right? 2028, end of 2028, something like that. So that's how I see it. And unfortunately, like from a mining perspective, that hardware will become less and less useful, especially because we are seeing astronomical changes in the from a technological perspective on the Bitcoin mining hardware side of things, right? And they're ramping up new model after new model after new model. The turnover time is a lot faster from Bitmain and others. From a macro lens, this setup looks more fragile than ever indeed. As crypto analyst Stackholder noted, the Trump administration's attempt to lower 10-year yields using tariffs and spending cuts to signal fiscal discipline has fallen short. Now the U.S. deficit is set to rise, history repeating mounting debt, currency deflation, and global financial reset, as the analyst put it. There's still $7 trillion sitting in money market funds. All of that will eventually rush into something that can't be printed. And as the only credibly finite store of value asset which has consistently outperformed, Bitcoin will ultimately be the biggest winner. That capital, once unleashed, could fuel a much larger move than most 2025 predictions currently anticipate. That would be best case scenario. I'd love to see it, right? Joe Burnett of Unchained even posits a coming sovereign race to accumulate Bitcoin, possibly driving its price to 1 million by 2030. Kathy Wood's ARK Invest sees a wide band of potential between 500,000 and 2.4 million. These numbers may seem extreme, but in a world where the U.S. debt spiral shows no signs of slowing and where fiat stability is increasingly questioned, they are no longer easy to dismiss. As the case for Bitcoin continues to strengthen, the market may only be beginning to price in its role in the coming financial realignment. So obviously the narrative surrounding Bitcoin is that, Bitcoin's going to be your hedge against inflation. And because of the current economic status of the United States, which holds the US dollar, which is the world's reserve currency, and the overprinting that's going to be coming from the big, beautiful bill proposed by the Trump administration, passing the House, right? Is it in the Senate now? Something like that. And it has to go back to the House. Because of and then raising the debt ceiling again, because of all of that, and the printing that will be induced because of that you would say, well, Bitcoin's going to go up from inflation. I've said this in the past a lot of times, right? I've said Bitcoin's a hedge against inflation. The more money we print, the higher the price of Bitcoin will go. It hasn't proven to be 100% true, right? So there's a point where I have to say, this is my blinders on Bitcoin perspective. Bitcoin's the answer. Fix the money, fix the world. It's a hedge against inflation. That's my Bitcoin blinders, right? But if I take the blinders off and I look at reality, that's not how Bitcoin hasn't soared because of inflation. It's only ever soared because of the halving cycle, which you could say is related to inflation to a certain extent, but not really, right? Not 100%, right? And it has followed some, like it is still affected by traditional market makers in general too. So I don't think necessarily that it will be as impactful as people expect it to be. And here's the thing, whenever people start talking like this and we start seeing these types of articles and these types of predictions, the last two cycles I've been in, whenever I start seeing these types of predictions, top is in. Right? Top is in at that point. When I start seeing these types of things, typically. Could I be wrong? Yeah, I could be. But when I look at, we'll go back to the chart if I can get it to refresh. When I look at this chart here and I see this, right here at the end, it looks like this. Maybe not, right? I'm just saying it looks like it. It could be this, right? It could be this right here. It could be this. Could be that right there. But like time, let's see, time between peaks, right? 4 and 11. So that's 7 months. 12 and 6, that's 7 months between tops. Right? Yeah. Timeline perspective and forming of the chart. I'm a dummy. I don't do a lot of trade analysis, right? I don't do it. I don't do TA. I'm a dummy. It is what it is. I'll back off, focus on the tech side, but I still have to think about this stuff. Obviously, at least a little bit. And then when you see like hopium predictions like this coming out in April, I just kind of go, hey man, like, probably want to start selling some of my equipment. That's how I feel, right? Trading Nichols disagrees. He says quantitative is strongly here. I think Bitcoin and gold will still race and beat highs. Maybe, but that's the kind of talk I heard last cycle too, right? About like, yeah, and I know you meant quantitative easing. But yeah, this feels like opium to me to a certain extent. But, it is what it is. I hope you enjoyed this clip from the Crypto Mining Show. If you would like to see more from this particular episode, take a look up here. Don't forget to also subscribe to the channel. And if you want to support me directly, you can go to sonofatech.locals.com and become a member. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next Tuesday.